The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Bernie Simmons. I'm going to be facilitating the webinar this afternoon. You're all very welcome and thank you for joining. We're going to be looking at a particular aspect of an end-to-end digital platform that my company, Aviverse Limited, provides called My Council Services, and we're going to be looking specifically at the kind of customer self-service elements of that, although we will dip into some of the back office capability as well as part of a demonstration which we'll share with you over the next probably somewhere between 45 and 50 minutes. Before we get going, just a few frequently asked questions. We are recording the session. The reason for doing that is so that we can make it available to either everyone that attended or folks that didn't manage to make it but wanted to join as an on-demand video, so you'll be able to access that via our web property once we've processed the recording and made it available. That usually happens within the next 24 hours after the event or sooner. We will be sharing copies of the slides. Again, they'll be available from our website for download, so we'll make those available to you as a PDF copy. If you like what you see this afternoon and you want us to, or you'd like to arrange a specific session for you and your colleagues, kind of a private seminar for your organisation, for your local authority, we're certainly very open to that. Just get in contact with either me or my colleague Rachel, and we'll arrange that for you. And then that brings me on to the final point of housekeeping, which is in terms of questions. Because we've got quite a few people on the session, we mute all the lines automatically. The reason, not that we don't want to speak with you and interact with you in that way, it's just that what we find is when you open all the lines up and allow people to speak, it can get quite chaotic, particularly if some delegates and participants are sat in open plan offices with a bit of background noise. So we mute that, which means you can relax if you do have a bit of background noise. It's not going to disturb anyone else. But it does mean that if you're going to ask questions, we'd ask you to use the chat facility on the GoToMeeting console. Once you've all dialed in, or having dialed in, you will get a console for the web part of the meeting, and that will allow you access to a chat facility at the bottom of that console. And if you direct your questions to my colleague, Rachel Clinton, so Rachel is really kind of orchestrating and pulling the strings in the background. I may well be facilitating, but Rachel is making sure that everything runs smoothly. So if you direct any questions you might have at any time to Rachel via the chat facility, Rachel will do her best to answer them. If we run out of time or it's a particularly complex or detailed answer, then we might take that offline with you, as they say these days, and follow up individually to help you answer that. But we're very happy to take questions and would encourage you to ask them as and when they occur to you. So that's kind of the housekeeping rules dealt with and frequently asked questions dealt with. In terms of running time, I mentioned we're going to be somewhere between kind of 45 and 55 minutes, I would have thought, today. So you'll be certainly away within the hour. And you may even have time for a cup of tea and a comfort break between this and your next commitment, whenever that might be. In terms of agenda, I'm going to give you a bit of background to current public sector challenges. We'll move through that fairly quickly. I'll provide you with a bit of background to My Council Services, and also we'll give over most of the time this afternoon to the demonstration of the platform. So we'll actually show you some of the functionality live using a demo environment. And I've talked about how best to answer questions using the chat facility. I'm not sure, I can't remember whether I've introduced myself or not. If I haven't, my apologies. My name is Bernie Simmons. I'm one of the directors of Aviverse here, and I'll be your main facilitator this afternoon. Okay, so in terms of current public sector challenges, I don't think this is going to be dramatic or unexpected news to anybody, because we've been, and I say we, and I'll explain why I say we in a minute, but we've been working under the kind of prevailing conditions of shrinking budgets and the need to demonstrate cashable savings, alongside that reducing resources, so often the divestiture of both people and sometimes assets that are owned by the council and run by the council. So there's certainly two key challenges in terms of, sort of front and centre of the things that are keeping chief executives and senior leadership teams awake at night in local authorities. And then on the flip side of that, you've got ever-increasing and shifting customer expectations. So I think it's fair to say that customers these days levy fairly high expectations of customer service and prompt response and so on of all of their service providers, whether you happen to be a service provider in the public realm, such as a local authority, or whether they're thinking about their commercial sector providers that deliver their groceries, or where they go clothes shopping, or where they get their car serviced, or whatever it might be. We've all increasingly, as consumers outside of our professional lives got increasing expectations around quality and choice when it comes to service. And on that question of choice, you will be familiar with the fact that customers can now choose to some extent the channel through which they want to contact you. They're no longer restricted to the more traditional channels of telephone, face-to-face and email. They want to use websites and self-service transactions, which is what we talk about this afternoon. And also things like social media are creeping onto the scene in terms of a self-service context and operational context. So no shortage of challenges. I deliberately used the words "we" when I talked about dealing with these challenges, and I include my company Avivus in those challenges because we've built our business exclusively with local authorities over the last 7 to 10 years, really. 7 years in terms of technology, but 10 years the business has been around. So we have been working alongside and with our customers through the white heat of austerity, and have had to keep our projects sufficiently agile and nimble because of some of these challenges. So this certainly kept us on our toes. I want to talk just for a couple of minutes around some of the kind of structural challenges, if you will, from a local authority perspective. I've titled this slide "The Typical Legacy Local Government Structure," and it's been created really to try and, I suppose, share the concept that historically local authorities have tended to be quite siloed in their organisational structure. And I don't say that with any kind of pejorative or critical sense. It's just an observation. As I said, we only work with local authorities at Avivus, so we spend a lot of time talking to and working with our customers and our prospective customers. And when you talk about the structure, historically, things have tended to be quite siloed. So, what that means is a function such as waste or planning or revs and bends, or whatever it might be, is involved in getting on with its day-to-day business and doesn't often necessarily talk to some of the other service areas that exist across the council. There may be some that are more necessarily connected than others, but a lot of the time you're operating in a degree of kind of siloed isolation. And that makes sense when you think about the fairly technical, resource-intensive nature of many of the frontline services that local authorities are mandated to deliver. You think about domestic and trade and clinical refuse and waste collections, that they are not trivial services to organise and deploy. They're intensive in terms of resource, they're complex because of the logistics of them and the importance of them to the customers that are in receipt of them. And then think about things like housing, whether that's directly administered or whether you're just involved in the revenues and benefits side of housing. Thinking about health and leisure, thinking about education services if you're part of a shire or a unitary authority. These are complex, crucially important services. So it kind of makes sense psychologically that if you were involved in the delivery of those services, you would be focused on making sure that ran smoothly. You wouldn't necessarily be looking up and across at what your colleagues elsewhere were doing. So there's the kind of the logical evolutionary reasons for why local authorities have been developed in quite a siloed way over the years. But there are some unforeseen consequences and downsides of that, and they really are that you tend to end up with a siloed approach with two other things happening. You tend to find that those individual service areas go out and do their own thing from an IT point of view, so will buy a set of technology that helps them do their particular part of the service delivery, and you will also, off the back of that, often find that they're developing their own administration functions internally, which when you're faced with times of austerity and reduction in government grants and less cash and less resources about, can look like an unsustainable infrastructure to have to carry, where you've got lots of duplication going on. So what have we seen happen? Well, we've seen quite an impressive and actually quite a rapid response to some of these challenges from an organisational point of view. Before I move on to the response, just a few words around the issues with this approach. It tends to mean that if you've got this very siloed approach, you've got fairly high cost of ownership, both in terms of technology and also processes. You'll be dealing with lots of vendors, lots of different things done in different ways. You end up with fragmented data and systems, and data in those systems, which is challenging when you want to try and get a sense of what your customers are doing in the round and how they're interacting with you as an organisation. And it's even more challenging and sweat-inducing potentially when you think about it in the glaring light of GDPR and ever-tightening data protection regulations and legislations. You need to know where your data is and how much you've got it on your customers and what you've done to it, and that you can demonstrate that you've managed it safely. And then from a customer experience management point of view, you often, with the siloed approach, end up with very diverged procedures and lots of complex, very different ways of interacting with the council. So there's some distinct downsides, and one of them being it's quite an expensive model to run. So what have we seen happen? Well, we've seen a few things happen, actually. And again, this is not a propaganda piece from Abacus. This is very much kind of an observation and a kind of sharing exercise from our own experiences. We've seen the emergence in local authorities of what we would call kind of an enterprise customer service layer. And that is invariably a multi-channel, omni-channel layer. So, electronic means of communication via the web, via email, via apps, via browsers, whatever it might be. And alongside that, typically the maintenance of at least some form of telephony or face-to-face service, so that customers can choose their channel of choice, be it electronic or be it person-to-person in that regard. So we've seen that emerge in kind of a pan-organisational layer of customer services. We've then seen the kind of, I suppose, the increased slimming down of those service delivery functions. So ensuring that you're maintaining a viable service delivery capability, but probably running that more lean than perhaps in a leaner way than perhaps it looked 10 or 15 years ago. And then in the background, you've really got IT doing their level best to facilitate and enable everybody from a technology standpoint, and also to try and get their hands around kind of fragmented data and make sure that they're maybe reducing down the number of systems. I think the other thing to mention at this point is to say that it's important not to forget, although it can be easy to forget, that there's almost always a customer at the centre of most local authority transactions. So it's important to make sure that the customer is not forgotten about in your process design, and that they can in fact be kept up to date. One of the reasons for sharing that background is it allows me to talk about some of the positives of that kind of more contemporary approach. If you can start to build a kind of uniform contact layer across the organisation and a self-service portal and a unified customer services function, then you tend to end up with more unified support processes. So that tends to save time, effort and money, and is good for customers from a customer experience point of view. You will gradually start to consolidate and reduce down the fragmented nature of your data if you take a more consolidated approach in terms of systems and system deployment and integration. You'll know where things are, you'll know how they're being used, you'll be able to answer all of those GDPR challenges. And at the same time, you will maintain a viable service delivery capability because you're being efficient in your front office, you're being efficient in the way you're deploying your IT, you will be able to save money, and you can plough some of that money back into service delivery capability. So the distinct upsides. The other thing that it allows me to do is just to share with you where our product set starts to fit in. So we offer what we call a modular system. I'll start at the very high level and then we'll get down into a bit more detail. But at the top level, to enable this kind of enterprise customer service layer, we offer a set of self-service technologies, which is what we're going to be focusing on this afternoon. Sitting alongside and behind that in terms of process, we offer a whole range of kind of back office systems or back office modules really, and I'll touch briefly on some of those this afternoon. But things that enable the back office to run efficiently and actually organise the digital process from end to end. So I suppose the way that we think about that is the self-service and CRM piece offers what you might describe as breadth of functionality, so the ability to deliver an omni-channel self-service experience for customers, and then the addition of the line of business modules, integration, workflow and automation rules give you what we would describe as depth of functionality, so the ability to automate a process all the way through from point of contact with the customer all the way through to resolution, either via council resources and personnel or an outsourced third party, a partner. And it enables the IT folks and the IT professionals in your organisation to start that journey of consolidation and to make sure that all of that data is less fragmented than it once was. So that's the top level of what we do. We offer a self-service and CRM layer. We offer a line of business kind of back office set of functionality, and we also offer a line of mobile working tools which allow that kind of end-to-end digital process creation. And we, through our rules and automation, we enable you to keep customers up to date in terms of what's happening and to create automated workflow. So there's quite a lot going on in there. I'm just going to expand out a few of those areas. I'm not going to spend too long on it because I do want to make sure we get a good deal of time for a demonstration this afternoon. But I just want to expand out some of those areas. So if we think about that self-service layer, there are various things that can be delivered within that. We offer either an eForms capability or a My Account Enterprise capability, so you can deploy things as individual digital processes, or you can present that to the customer as a My Account portal where they identify and verify themselves, or indeed both. You can have different processes certain processes that can be run as guests without registering and identifying yourself, or a set of processes where a customer can opt in, identify themselves, register, and then opt into the privilege of being kept up to date, accessing perhaps financial data, so on and so forth. If you're going to go down that enterprise My Account route, you may want to enable things like single sign-on, so sign on with a single set of credentials and have access to data that resides in multiple different systems. So I can access data that resides in health and leisure systems, in revs and bends systems, in housing systems, whatever it might be. If you're going to start releasing or making available and surfacing to customers, having registered and signed on data that is financial or potentially sensitive in nature, you're going to want different approaches to verification. So we also offer things like two-factor verification. I've also highlighted the GDPR concern down here. I've mentioned it a couple of times already. There's already tools built into the platform to help you as a local authority manage those GDPR overheads to make sure that you're compliant out of the box, as it were. And we also offer integration into third-party systems, and there's various approaches to that. So we recognise that we are not likely to be the only IT system in your organisation. There's going to be tens, if not hundreds of other systems potentially, and we have to play nicely with those, so integration is an important part of that. So if I move it on a little bit and talk a little bit about some of the back office functionality, this is where we've developed our depth of capability. So we've actually delivered and developed specific modules that speak to specific line of business functions. So we've got a discrete waste management module that allows for the creation and management of refuse collection schedules and the ability to surface that to customers, to work with third parties and so on and so forth. We offer something that we call license and contracts management. So that's really the ability to configure processes end-to-end that are digital in nature but allow for the creation of license-based or contract-based processes. So that might be signing up for a Green Garden Waste contract, which is perhaps a paid service in your authority. Or it might be signing up for a license to have a skip outside your property on the public thoroughfare, or to have scaffolding around a particular building, or to renew your minicab taxi driver's license, whatever it might be. There's lots of processes in a local authority that speak to that need to be able to run something that looks like a contract or a license. We offer a risk management module, which is really all about kind of regulatory and risk-based and compliance-based services. So an example of that would be if you want to deploy a process that enables the digitisation of your environmental health scheduled food safety inspection activities for your environmental health officers, risk management would play a part in that, because it can construct a score, spit out the appropriate food standards agency certificate, so on and so forth. So it can get into some quite detailed processes. We offer something that covers schedulings, bookings, and appointments. So if you want to make a reservation, for a registry office, or for an appointment to see a benefits advisor, or you want to book a sports facility, they're the same underlying types of principles from a system point of view, and we offer a line of business module that deals with and allows you to configure a whole range of different scheduling and appointment-based activities. So there's a few examples on that side of things. And then I mentioned it earlier, this kind of concept of mobile working. So if a customer reports let's take something simple like a fly tip, and they report that via their smartphone, via the browser or the app in the morning, and you automate the workflow of that through so that it gets assigned automatically out to a member of a street scene team member, they can pick that up on their device without the need to go back to base, collect a printed task sheet, all those sorts of things. So it's about digitisation end to end. So that's a fairly brisk walk through the range of functionality that we offer in terms of the customer self-service piece and the CRM piece, but also some of that depth of functionality around line of business capability. So for the time being, I'm going to jump out of the slides at this stage. We'll come back to them just to kind of wrap things up in the last 5 or 10 minutes. But what I'd like to do now is spend 15, 20 or so minutes walking you through some of those capabilities from a self-service perspective. I'll get rid of my scribbles on the screen, and we'll jump across to a browser interface. Shut a few windows down first off. So I'm going to go across to Google Chrome first of all, and what I'm going to do first off is actually sign in to a customer portal. You'll notice this is unbranded, but when we deliver this for local authorities, this is fully branded as an integral part of the council's web property. So you could also sign in as a guest. What I'm actually going to do here is sign in as a registered customer. So I'll talk more about who I'm signing in as in a moment, but I'm going to sign in as a pre-registered customer. and that will then log me into a My Account portal environment. So this is a typical kind of My Account portal capability. It's fully responsive in nature, so if I was to squeeze up the browser screen, you can see that it responds very nicely, which means you can use it across any range of devices and screen sizes. So a laptop, as I'm running here, or it could be a smartphone, or it could be a tablet, and we'll show you some other instances of that in a moment. So the first thing to probably stop and take stock of is just to have a tour around the screen real estate, so that I can point you in the right direction of where kind of key areas of functionality reside in this interface. And I'll draw your attention first off over to the left-hand side. So the left-hand side is a fully configurable drop-down menu. So you can have this set up in any way that you want. We've got a whole bunch of different options in here, from pay for it, book it, apply for it, report it, whatever it might be. Look up my bin day. This can be as long or as short as you wish. You can nest different options behind aggregated options and so on and so forth. I'll show you some examples of that. So that's the main left-hand navigation bar over on the left-hand sidebar there. In the center of the screen, as I hover over them, we've got what we call widgets. So again, these are configurable components, and these are things that customers can choose to view or choose not to view, depending on their areas of interest. So the council can configure as many of them as you wish. So we've got various examples here. We're going to be using an example from Redbridge Borough Council. They're actually not a customer of ours. Our first office as a company was based in Redbridge Borough, so we always use that as a demo instance, and we kind of use the geography around Redbridge in North East London. But this is just a demo site. So you've got an example up here which is retrieving and reporting the council tax balance for this particular customer. He's got a fairly significant outstanding council tax balance here. We're also retrieving information from a planning system that's telling us there are 125 current planning applications within the current postcode of this registered customer. And you could click through from here and get those details, or click into existing web content, whatever it might be. And these can be configured in any way that you like, these individual widgets. Sitting underneath that, more as a kind of a novelty than anything else for this purpose, is just some MI data, some management information about this particular customer. So you can present some of the customer's own data back to them as part of the portal if you want to. This is showing a pie chart of all of this customer's service requests that they've raised. So they've been a busy customer in that regard, and how many they've been raising by month. So this is obviously a demo account that I use quite a lot for these sorts of things. It looks like a fairly active customer. But you can configure this central palette of content in any way that you like to present data that resides in other systems, so effectively a web service call that surfaces data in another system, or it could be links to existing content, or it could be charts, or anything that you like, really. You can configure that screen, you can configure the left-hand sidebar any way that you wish. That then leads us over onto the right-hand side of the screen, so the right-hand sidebar. In the top right-hand corner, we've got the listing of all of this customer's activities, so by service request, by drafts, so incompleted processes, by contracts that they've signed up to with the council, any appointments bookings they've made, any tasks that are outstanding or associated with them. These, again, can all be configured and turned on and turned off as you see fit. Sitting underneath that is some slightly more detailed information. So you can either add different aspects of your relationship with the council to your portal environment here. So if I was to click, for example, on Add a Council Tax, that would open up a dialog box that allows me to verify my account number and my postcode, and there would then be a second tier of authentication, probably a PIN number sent back to the registered phone number, smartphone number of the customer, if they have such a thing, so that you could double verify. But you can actually sign up and add additional services having registered for the account in this context. So I'm not going to do that in a minute because I've actually got some data already created for this particular customer, which we'll go and take a look at in a moment. You can do the same with benefits claim. So that's, again, allowing a customer to present credentials and verify themselves in terms of a claim number, a postcode, and a national insurance number that will then allow them to be verified, which in turn will allow them to have access to a much greater detail of information about their interactions with the council, in this case benefits data. These would only be present if it's relevant for a customer to have that they're using those services to have access to those tools. Sitting underneath the ability to add those, the other example here actually is for landlords. So if you've got private or social sector landlords, you can also surface that information that resides in housing and revs and bend systems. Having registered those details, you can then allow a customer the ability to see those details, so to view details about my current benefits claims, my current council tax claims, my business rates details, whatever it might be. Of course, that's only dependent on the customers having verified themselves for those particular services and for those services being relevant to them. So we'll come back to that in a moment. What we'll do first off, though, is we'll go and just start to create a little bit of data. So the first thing I'm going to do is something very simple. I'm going to go to the Report It function, and I'm just going to try and use a form, so an e-form. So I've clicked on Report It, and that opens up a whole host of different Report It type forms that I might want to use as a customer. If I don't want to scroll through those, but there's a particular thing that I want to do, and in this case I want to report a fly tip, let's say, I can start to type in what it is I want to do, and it will start to match. As soon as it gets 3 characters or more, it will start to match to the tag data in that particular set of nested forms. So we might want to go and do a fly tip report. So we'll click on that form. That takes us then into an e-form environment. Again, it's fully responsive in that regard, so we can squeeze it up and we can use it on any screen size that we need to. When you go into that form, you get a breadcrumb trail across the top of that form. So you can see that you're on step 2, starting to gather details of a 5-step process. So your customer will know where they are in the process. As much as technically possible, we adhere to the Government Digital Service (GDS) standards in terms of visibility and interface design and so on. And you might recognise some of those cues. So the first question that it asks is this fly tip blocking a road or pathway? So we'll say yes that it is. And then, because we've said yes to that question, it then kicks into a little bit of conditional logic and said, is it blocking a road or pathway? Is it causing a health and safety issue? So we'll say, I had to step into the road to pass by. Is it on public or private property? So in this instance, in this template example, we're asking the customer to make that decision. You could actually automate the fact of whether that's establishing the fact of whether that's on public or private property once you capture the location, because of course this is a fly tip. It's happened on the surface of the planet somewhere. And you could use that kind of easting and northing information once it's captured to actually process whether it's on public or private property. But in this example, we're going to ask the customer to make that decision. So we'll say it's on public property. Did we see who committed it? We'll say no, we didn't. What's been dumped? We'll say general rubbish and furniture. Unordered favourites. Click on next. And then gives an opportunity to upload some evidence. So we can add a picture or a video or a sound recording or whatever's appropriate. You can control what's permissible to be uploaded. So we'll click on Add Files at this point, and we'll find the appropriate location on my desktop to find some pre-prepared examples. So we'll take that example. You can control the number of files, the size of files, the file extensions that you like. That's all part of the configuration process. We'll click on Next. We've talked about the importance of location for these sorts of activities, so we need to identify where we are. It will pick up my current location based on my IP address, so where I'm connecting to the internet from. So it's got a degree of intelligence with it, but I can override that if I wish. I could give it a partial address, a street house number and a street name, or I could give it a postcode. Just for accuracy, I'm actually going to give it a postcode. So I'm going to give it IG118PY, so that's a Redbridge postcode. As I type any part of that address in, it would be unusual, I accept, for a customer to type in the postcode location of a fly tip. It's more likely they're going to put in a partial address, a street name, maybe a building number or so on, and it will match against all of those, because what it's doing is matching against the NLPG, the National Land and Property Gazetteer. So My Council Services as a platform keeps on it at all times the most up-to-date, the contemporary version of NLPG. So that will match seamlessly with your local authority's version of LLPG, Local Land and Property Gazetteer. And that means you can get a UPRN off the back of it. We can get a full easting and northing, a grid reference off the back of it. So there's lots of benefits to working to that NLPG address-based standard. So we'll select an address. That will resend to that map for us into North East London, into Redbridge, as I said. We then just need to give it an incident date. So we'll say that's today, and we'll give it a priority. You don't have to ask any of these questions in this order. This is just a templated example. And then having created that data, we then get an opportunity as a customer. Just click on Next, and it will collate all that data for us. And we'll be able to see that on screen, get a last opportunity to review that, both in terms of the questions that we've answered, the images that we've uploaded, the location data that we've given it. We can go back and change that. We could save it and submit later, what I'm going to do is go ahead and I'm actually going to go and submit that. There we go. So that's a very simple process. Do you want to go and do a couple more more detailed processes in a second or two? But before I do that, I want to draw your attention back down to some of the other aspects of data surfacing and data sharing for customers that have taken the trouble and the time to register and to identify themselves and verify themselves. So if you want to present more detailed financial information, you'll want to verify your customers. We've talked about how we can do that in terms of multi-step verification in an earlier part of this session. But having done that, once a customer is verified, they then get the ability to view data that you choose to make available to them. So if they want to go and view their council tax data, you can click on View Council Tax. And what this example is actually doing is going through to some synthetic data, but it is referencing live data in a Revs and Bens system as part of this demo environment. In this example, it's actually polling data from Northgate Revs and Bens, and we can integrate into any number of Revs and Bens systems securely and safely, and with verified customer identification, allow that to be surfaced for a customer. So we can see for this customer at this particular address, they've got a current outstanding council tax balance of 153,224, because it's quite a significant backlog. Again, because we're referencing live data, I can click on details and it will drill back down into the detail of those specifics of those arrears. So we're accessing in real time live Revs and Bens data. As I said, this is synthetic data, so it's not real data, but the structure and concept of it is exactly as it would be if it was in a local authority. So that's council tax data. We can do the same with benefits data, so we can make that available for customers, again, subject to the appropriate registration and authentication process for customers to make sure that you've got the right people and that you've mitigated any risk of fraud or people seeing data that they shouldn't see. And if I click through in this particular example, in Gary Wilcox's example, and look at benefits claim data, I can see data that is being surfaced in near time from the council's revenues and benefits system. So it shows that the customer at some point was entitled to council tax reduction, that entitlement has now been cancelled, and it shows the term of that entitlement and what the status of the entitlement scheme was, the address that it was against, so on and so forth. So they're all the time creating opportunities for a customer to self-serve as opposed to have to come into the council to speak to someone, and in doing so, driving channel shift. We can do the same around housing benefits. So this, again, synthetic data sitting behind this for my made-up customer Gary Wilcox against his fictitious Redbridge address, and you can see all of the details of his weekly entitlement. He can see all of the details of his weekly entitlement for housing benefit, and I can drill right down to the way that those entitlements were calculated. So again, this is accessing the granular level data that sits within typically the Revs and Bens system, a back office system, and making it available and visible to the customer in a safe and secure way so that the customer can really get into the detail and has much less need to lean onto the council, customer services, the Revs and Bens function, whatever it might be, to answer some of those kind of more kind of first and second phase questions. So we can do that for any data really that resides within the council. You can surface that securely both for domestic customers or for business customers. And again, this is a slightly contrived example because my fictitious customer Gary here has got both benefits claim data, he's got council tax data, and he's got business rates information. But all of that information is available to be surfaced in a safe and secure way, all of which is helping to drive channel shift and reduce the reliability on customer services in your local authority organisation. So there's a little bit more about the ability to surface detailed information of a sensitive nature subject to the appropriate verification steps. If Gary then wants to go on, my pretend customer Gary Wilcox then wants to go on and pay for something, he could use the form to do that. He could either click through from the widget to do that, or indeed he could drop back into a pay for it form and do that. So if he wants to check and pay his council tax balance, he clicks on the e-form, surfaces the same consistent information of his current outstanding balance as of today's date. So if he's got, again, the breadcrumb trail across the top of it, he then clicks on next. That will take him to our first point, or actually our second point of integration. We've talked about integration into data that resides in a Revs and Ben system and how you make that available to a customer to view and review in a safe and secure environment. This is our second point of integration, and what we're doing here is allowing the customer to access our payment gateway and merchant services capability securely through the My Account portal, in this example, to settle their council tax balance. We're linking into the Barclaycard test payment gateway here. We've integrated into Capita, into Civica, into WorldPay, into Iridium, into a whole range of them. Adelante is another popular one currently that we've done a lot of integrations into. So I'm going to copy in some credit card data. So I'll click on the payment icon first off. So it's then doing a secure handshake between the My Council Services portal and the councils, in this case the test council for Redbridge environments and payment gateway environment, being run by Barclaycard. It picks up the value of the transaction and it picks up the order reference, so you've got consistent cross-referencing of data for reconciliation of financial reports subsequent to the transaction being completed. I select the card type. I put in the cardholder's name, so that's my pretend customer Gary Wilcox. I paste in those card details. I put in an expiry date. This is a test card, so I don't think it will work on Amazon. If you want to take a note of that card number, you're welcome to, but I don't think it will work. And then we'll click on put a verification code in and then confirm our payment. Let the payment card industry compliant process run. So that's the PCI piece, the payment gateway doing its piece. It then hands a confirmation of the process that it's been successful back to the customer, back to My Council Services, so the customer can see it. So that payment has been accepted. And then all the customer needs to do is click on next, get a final summary of all that information, and then submit that form. So the customer there has been able to go through and not only view their council tax data in quite a lot of detail through either the widget or the dynamic linking back to the Revs and Ben system on the right-hand side panel. They can also use forms in any of those locations to go and clear those things away. So there's a whole range of different processes, from simple things like reporting and telling the council about something, through to more sophisticated activities like reviewing council tax, benefits arrangements, business rates, through to paying those. So you can do everything in between, and that includes doing things like booking and payment for things, so that you can really enable for customers any range of transactions. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a sense for some of the capabilities of the portal. The final thing that I need to show you is just to click on the top right-hand corner on the thumbnail of my pretend customer Gary. And I'm just going to click on the email address that Gary's got registered, and that will drop us through into an account management profile for Gary. And actually here there's quite a lot of important stuff here. Then you can choose how much you surface for the customer or how little you surface for the customer. But Gary, as our pretend customer, can see all of his contact details, including any change of address within the borough. All of his contact details can be updated and managed from here. And if I draw your attention over to the right-hand menu option, then you've got a couple of important things from a GDPR point of view that I just want to call out. One is erasure. If I click on the erasure option, this gives the customer the ability to erase individual records that the council holds against their account that identifies, in this case, Gary, my pretend customer. So he could choose to go and delete and anonymise that fly tipping report that he created a little bit earlier, or that check and payment of council tax balance that we created just a few seconds ago. That would then send a request to the local authority to say the customer has requested for these records to be removed and deleted and for his details to be removed from them. You would maintain the fact on the council side that a transaction happened, but it could become anonymised. I say could because there's an important policy that sits above that, which is on the platform you can configure your own organisation level data retention policy. So if Gary has indeed gone and paid some of his council tax this afternoon, but there's still an outstanding balance, and then requested to remove some of that data about him from your records, you could actually override that because you've got lawful purpose to do so, because he's still owing money on his council tax, for example. So there's two concepts there. One is erasure of individual records from a customer's point of view, and giving them the ability to do that within GDPR, the right to be forgotten effectively, or partially forgotten in this case, and then the opportunity to trump that with the council's retention policy, data retention policy. I'm not going to delete anything at this stage. I'm just going to click on cancel because there's another level of of data erasure and that relates to the right to be forgotten, which is called deregistration. So if I click on deregistration, the customer can actually request to be removed in their entirety, so that effectively they're forgotten by the council. And again, that would be subject to the same governance gateway of submitting it to, does this individual have the right to release or remove all of his data, or indeed do we have lawful right to retain some records about this customer, and do we need to retain records for whatever reason? So there's two things that play very closely into data protection legislation and upcoming GDPR legislation: erasure and deregistration, and then your lawful right as a local authority to retain that data for whatever demonstrable reasons. A couple of other kind of less serious issues in this context. Gary, as a customer, could also manage the groups that they subscribe to from here and manage the widgets that they see on their interface, so on and so forth. So they've got an ability within this kind of My Account interface to do a whole range of different things. So where we're going to go next is just into the back office for a short while and just take a look at some of that data that's been created by Gary as a customer. But that hopefully gives you a useful and kind of suitable level of detail around the capabilities within the My Account portal at an enterprise level from a My Council Services point of view. So what I'm going to do next is log in actually to the back office. So I'm going to log in under a different profile at this stage. So I'm going to go into bernie@adverse.co.uk, which is my profile. So I'm effectively logging in as a council officer at this point under my own profile. So this is not an interface that a customer would see. This is something that a council officer might see. So if I log into that, that will take me into the My Council Services back office environment. And you'll see a couple of things straight away. We've just dropped into an environment that we call Service Desk. So Service Desk is very much kind of sort of the service-oriented view of the world. And here we're looking at just at report-it type processes, so we can see flight tipping and bin collection problems and so on. So this at the top of the list today at 15:30. If I click into that, then you'll see the detail around that particular service request. And just let that screen refresh. And that drops us into all of the detail that Gary just created for us as a customer. So we can see who did it. So we can see it was Gary Wilcox at his email address. We can see the answers to the questions on the form that he provided. We can see the photograph that he uploaded. We can see where the location of the incident was that he was reporting. If I scroll down, we get a full audit trail of everything that's been done to that particular service request, right from the point at which Gary created it. So there was an initial status update, an email was sent back to the customer to confirm. We then automatically applied what we call a service level policy to this particular fly tip. We sent a message back to the customer to say that something had been done, and then our rules engine has kicked in and automatically changed the owner. So we're catching up. So we've got some automated rules that are running here that allow us to manage the workflow of this particular downstream activity when dealing with a fly tip in a semi-automated way, or in this case, a fully automated way. So two things have happened. The owner has changed. It's been assigned to me as an owner, and also a separate task has been created underneath the service request to assign it out to another colleague of mine so that they can go and deal with it. So we're not only are we allowing the customer to self-serve at point of contact, we're then automating the downstream process to assign that piece of work out to a street scene worker or whatever it might be, whichever service area it belongs to. And those rules can get really quite intelligent. If you want to find out more about our mobile working capability, you would want to come along to our mobile worker seminar, which we'll be running one of those in the not too distant future. So that's Service Desk in terms of a kind of service-oriented view of the world in that regard. The other area that I want to take you to is just across the contact center. So as well as offering the self-service capability via a portal or via a suite of web forms, we also offer what we call contact center, which is our a specific application, CRM application designed for use by local authorities. And what I'm going to do here, you start off with just a search box. So on the theme of Gary Wilcox, my made-up customer, if I start to type Gary's surname into my search box, what it will start to do is it will start to search all of the appropriate data in the platform that matches those search terms. So on the left-hand side, it's retrieving people with the names, with a name that includes the letters WILCO at this stage, and we can see Gary in there. It can retrieve all of the associated service requests, so with people who have submitted them that match that search term, and also all of the appropriate addresses. So it's searching across multiple parameters and multiple facets of the data in the platform. So if we were to choose Gary Wilcox's record from here, that will then drop us in to a much more kind of customer-focused world of what Gary's doing with us as a customer, so with his pretend instance for Redbridge Borough Council. And what you get with Contact Centre is a fully fledged CRM system that gives you a customer-centric lens on individual customers. So we can see on the right-hand sidebar here that we've got all of Gary's details. We can see his name, his address, the language that he speaks. We've also got some specific information about him. So we've got some dynamic fields here that tells us whether he's got a violent marker record against his name. And again, for the purposes of demonstration, we've said that Gary has. And then if he's got a violent marker, then what do we need to watch about around when we're dealing with Gary? Well, it's control measure 1, whatever that might be. It might be that you call the police before you go to his property, or notify the police, or whatever it might be. It also tells us that he's a vulnerable adult. So we're surfacing information here that you wouldn't make available necessarily to a My Account portal, but you would want someone that was dealing with him on the phone, or that may be going to set up a face-to-face visit with him to have access to. So that's the right-hand sidebar can be configured to surface a broader range of information around the customer. If I take you to the central palette of content for Contact Centre, at the top of the screen we get all of his service requests. So that service request for fly tipping that Gary just created on the 7th of December at 15:30, that's now visible to us alongside all of the other service requests that he's created historically and their current status, those that are open. We can see all of the interactions that Gary has had with myself and colleagues on the council that are working in this instance, and I can see all the contracts that he's got in place. You can see that we demo quite a bit around Green Garden Waste and some of those paid-for contracts. So Gary's got a whole bunch of those in place, and also all the appointments and bookings that he's got. So if you were a customer service agent dealing with Gary on the phone, you would be very well equipped to handle that conversation in the most appropriate session. You know a lot in the most appropriate way, I should say. You know a lot about Gary as an individual because you've got that data surfaced to you discreetly on the right-hand side of the screen that only you can see, and you can see all of the interactions that Gary's had, so you'll be able to help him and assist him in any way that he wants. You can also run transactions and processes as mediated and assisted processes. So if I click up here under service request, I then, as a user, get access to all of the report it, pay for it, apply for it forms. So if Gary wants to do a process where it's assisted and mediated by me, I'm equipped to do that. So I'm effectively using the same forms that Gary would be able to use on a self-service basis internally. So you've got those forms facing in multiple directions. So just draw your attention up to the top of the screen. There's an action button up here, so there's certain things that I can do from here. So if I need to, as a result of any activity with Gary, of my interaction with Gary today, I need to send him an email. I can click on send email, and we might say, well, we're going to send that from customer services at avamust.co.uk. Gary's asking about, let's say he's asking about in-year admissions for his children into school. So we select the templated version. That then automatically creates a templated version with all of the appropriate links and details that Gary will need. We know who Gary is because he's a registered customer. All I then need to do to send that email is click on send, and it will dispatch that templated, personalised information out to Gary. I could then follow up by sending him an SMS on something else, or create a task for somebody, whatever else it might be, or logging in at the specific interaction. If I click away from that and just draw your attention to the right-hand sidebar again, you'll notice that we've logged an outbound email activity that's date stamped as an activity, and if I click on finish there, that will then write that activity to Gary's central record. And that then, having clicked finish, that takes us out of Gary's record, so I'm then equipped to deal with the next inbound call, whatever it might be. And on that note, we can also offer full integration into telephony platforms so that you can do things like screen popping, automatic population of screen, and identification of customer based on inbound phone number, so on and so forth. So all of those sorts of capabilities are there and available to you. So just to kind of recap what we've done so far, because we've covered quite a lot of ground in the last 45 minutes or so. We started off by having a tour around and working through and creating some data in transactional data as a customer using a self-service portal. We then dipped back into the back office, and we've used a couple of interfaces. So we've used Service Desk, which is a more simplistic service-orientated interface for running kind of workflow in the back office, and then a slightly more customer-centric and slightly more sophisticated interface, which is called Contact Centre. That's our CRM offering. The last piece that I want to show you before we wrap up, and I'll let you get on with the rest of your Thursday afternoon, is just to take you across to the administration panel. One of the underpinning, I suppose, philosophies, if that's not too grandiose a term, that we hold close to us in terms of our ongoing development of the platform is to make the My Council Services platform as configurable as possible by you, our customers. By our customers, I mean UK local authorities. That's who we work with. So the administration environment creates or enables the council to configure a whole range of different aspects of the platform to run in the way that you want to do it. So what that means is if you make the decision to invest in and implement something like My Council Services, obviously there's levels of support and implementation around an initial project and ongoing support, but you're then at liberty to configure different processes and deploy them in any way that you want. So you're not on the hook back to us as the provider at every turn in your journey to make a change request because you need a new process designed or a new form designed, or you want to make a change to an existing process. All of that is embodied and embedded in the administration screens under configuration capability. And that runs from things like form design, right from forms builder and form design to creation of rules. And if you are in the business of designing forms, but you're not necessarily keen on reinventing the wheel, you can also use our form store. So if I just draw your attention to the form store, if you want to go in and borrow with pride is how we like to describe it. We used a fly tip example earlier, and you want to find out who else is developing fly tip forms on the platform and making them available for sharing. Well, there's no surprises. There's no shortage of other customers who have already gone through the process of designing a fly tip form. Whether you want to borrow from Allerdale up in Cumbria, or Ashford in Kent, or Anglesey in North Wales, or Belfast over in Northern Ireland, or Medway Council, or wherever it happens to be, we enable a facility, because we only work with UK local authorities, of our customers being able to share with one another assets that they might design, and that really kind of starts around the form design piece. So there's a concept within that of kind of reusability, I suppose. A couple of other aspects of that. I'm going to draw your attention over to the general tab for configuration. I just want to show you a couple of things in here. So if I click on the plugin example, we used in one of the processes that our pretend customer Gary Wilcox completed a payment capability. So we used the payment gateway integration with Barclaycard. Now we used one process there. We used one payment process, which was using the payment gateway to check and pay for council tax balance. That particular capability requires integration between My Council Services and between your selected payment gateway provider. The way that we work that is we build that integration for you once, and we then leave it on your instance, on your platform, for you to reuse in any way that you want. So if, in this example, you can see Barclaycard is sitting on there as a plugin, you can see examples from Capita and Civica and WorldPay and GoCardless and so on. But once we've done that integration to your payment gateway capability once, that then sits on your secure instance of My Council Services to be reused. So if you do a process for payment of council tax on a Monday, but on the Tuesday you want to design and deploy a process for payment of green garden waste collection services, you can just reuse that plugin capability. So you don't have to do an integration per process. We do it per instance, and that allows you to reuse that and makes for a much more efficient use of that development activity and integration activity that we've completed. You can see from here there are a whole range of different configuration options. I'm not going to click through every single one of them because I'm conscious of the time. We're coming up to 4 o'clock, and I did promise I'd have you away within an hour. Just a couple of last things to show you. Dashboard configuration. So we were looking at the portal capability where you could create these widgets in the middle of the screen. Within the dashboard configuration is where you can create all those individual widgets and menu options. So you can really kind of change the way that your portal looks to reflect the timing of necessary changes in terms of processes, the way that you want it laid out. All of this also is subject to role-based access control, so it's both for customers and for back office staff. So you can govern who can see what. That means both in terms of processes, functionality and data. So the whole thing is buttoned down and secure in terms of role-based access control. But I suppose the overriding message from the administration perspective is there's an awful lot in here that allows you to manage, configure and govern the way that your platform works in terms of processes, in terms of technical integrations, and in terms of aesthetics, color schemes, icons, fonts, all those sorts of things. So the whole thing is very, very manageable. So just to kind of wrap things up in the last couple of minutes or so, I'm just going to jump back to the slides and bring those full screen again. And I just want to kind of summarise where we're at. So I suppose from our point of view, when we think about the challenges and our response to those transformation challenges for local authorities, we think very much about self-service. It's important that you should allow customers the option and the choice to self-serve where and when they want to. So that's an important consideration. We also strongly advocate the use of automation where it's appropriate to do so. So if you're dealing with a particularly vulnerable client, maybe automation of a process is not appropriate. In fact, you want the kind of human interaction and the benefit of person-to-person human decision making in those scenarios. But for the vast majority of cases and processes, there's usually quite a strong argument to use automation. From our side of the coin, in terms of keeping our end of the bargain, we've only ever done this under the white heat of austerity, so we've always had to make our solutions cost effective. And because we work with both large and small authorities, we have to make them scalable. We've got more than 1 million users successfully using the platform on a daily basis, with significant amounts of automation across a broad range of different council processes. On that note, I'll just mention a few of our clients. I won't list them all back to you. As I said earlier, we will make a copy of the slides available to you. There's a selection of about 20 odd clients on that slide. We work with over 50 UK local authorities, and that is up and down the kind of constitutional stack, from relatively small districts to kind of mid to large boroughs and metro and borough authorities, right up to very large unitaries. And there's a few examples on the screen at that point. And then just to finish off, if you want to extend the conversation, or you want to get back in touch with us, there's a whole bunch of ways that you can do that, on web, on email, via social media. Don't hesitate to come back to us and speak to us in more detail with any particular questions that you might have. At that point, I promised that I would have you away within the hour and let you get on with the rest of your Thursday. I wish you a pleasant remaining Thursday afternoon and evening, and just thank you once more for attending. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye now.